evening and welcome to the Charles River Parkland show. My name is Renata von Tscharner and we're going to talk about a very special aspect of the Parklands with a very special guest. Welcome, Eli Newberger.
Thanks, Renata.
And in the introduction to this show, you heard some music. And this is music that Eli actually played, the muddy water music. And tonight we're going to look at the Parklands and the river from a very special perspective, from your perspective as a jazz player, as a pediatrician. You teach at the Harvard University faculty, and you have been a founder of the new Black Eagle Jazz Band, have been played as a pianist and 30 years as a tuba player, and now you have your own orchestra that you will tell us about. And it was you who introduced me to the fact that so many jazz songs have this theme of the river. And you came to our first anniversary of the Charles River Conservancy and played a whole program of river songs. That was just a very special event.
It was great.
And then in part of the program, we'll be talking about your work as a pediatrician and an author of books. This particular book, Men, They Will Become. And the connection to that book is the importance for young men to have something that is challenging them, and that, of course, is the skate park we're building.
Yes.
So let's start with the music. Tell us a little bit about how jazz and rivers, how they come together and how that then comes into your work.
Well, for every jazz musician, the story of jazz begins with the city of New Orleans, which is, of course, where the Mississippi River forms a vast agricultural delta. And the commercial capital of it is located very close to where the Mississippi empties into the Gulf of Mexico. Now we realize now with a special sense of sadness in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, how important and how fragile is the culture of New Orleans that produced jazz in the late 1900s, and most especially at that early time in the 20th century when the unique aspects of New Orleans culture connected intimately to the Mississippi. Both was the setting in which the earliest recordings of jazz were made, where the steamboats, especially those on the Streckfus line that went from New Orleans up the river, not as far as St. Louis in the original days, but enough to entertain people in the evenings. And the most important and influential jazz player in New Orleans, Louis Armstrong, got his start at the generous and wise and very much foresighted guidance and mentoring by a man named Joseph Oliver, who was called King Oliver, and who had a band that played on one of the steamships out of New Orleans. And that was when Armstrong, playing second cornet to King Oliver, first began as a teenager to be acknowledged in this world of music, and indeed where he made with Oliver a series of recordings that profoundly shaped the future of American music, and I'm talking not just jazz music, but popular music, rock and roll, blues, and very much of classical music as well, was affected by this unique set of circumstances where the Mississippi River, all of the river lore, very much wove in to the musical experience.
Now there's the river lore because New Orleans is on a river. And where did the theme of the river in spirituals, where did that flow into that jazz?
Well, one important stream of the root of jazz is the African American music that was associated with the church. And what we now refer to as the gospel tradition really is woven into liturgy and the songs of service, and especially the spirituals, many of which summoned up the River Jordan, symbols of baptism and absolution, and they found their way into the music in remarkable ways among the jazz songs that were played as platforms for people's improvising. In other words, the song would be played by a band as it was originally conceived, but then the jazz musicians would use that as a as a vehicle for improvising over the harmonies in the songs. Were those that were associated with the rolling Jordan River, or down by the riverside, ain't gonna worry, don't worry, war no more, and beat swords into plowshares. And these were things right out of the spiritual tradition, where the words literally summoned up riverine images, but then also, not insignificantly in New Orleans, there was also a rich European musical tradition. Concerts in the park played by jazz bands and proper orchestras very often used themes that were the essence of entertainment in public spaces, not a few of which also, because of the unique environment of New Orleans, would bow in the direction of popular riverine entertainment. I mean, one lovely song from the period is the old, what's become an American standard, called "Up the Lazy River." Just play a few.
You going to play that?
Yeah, sure.